in terms of introductions, I'm Janie. I'm the director of ECCR. I'm an accountant with a background in banking before moving over some 5 years ago into the charity sector, where I was the finance director for a charitable foundation before joining ECCR about a year ago. I'm passionate about how we can look at our resources holistically, both as individuals, but also as the church, to shape a fairer and more just world.
Hi, I'm Rosie. I manage the Money Makes Change programme, so working alongside Janie at ECCR. I joined ECCR back in October. I've worked a lot with churches and volunteers in lots of different contexts, but so I'm quite new to the world of ethical finance. So I'm kind of living proof that you absolutely don't have to be an accountant or a money expert to start thinking about some of these issues and start connecting your faith and your finances. So that's us. We're looking forward to getting to know you throughout the session. I'm just going to run through what we're going to cover, just as a to help you kind of see where we're going with things. So in this hour, we're going to share with you an introduction to the Money Makes Change programme, and we're going to focus for most of the session on our workshop resource for small groups, which we launched in January, and we're going to take you through that in an interactive way. So that you get a real taste of it. And we're going to give you a taster of 2 of the conversations in the workshop resource around the big picture and banking. So more about that in a little bit. We're also going to run through some of the other resources that we have for individuals and churches, and talk about how you can stay in touch with the programme and get more involved. And then we'll have some time for questions at the end. So I hope that's somewhere close to what you were expecting from this evening. I'm aware that some of you might be familiar with lots of the topics that we're covering. For others, it will be new grounds, but you're all really welcome. And I'm going to hand back to Janie now for a couple of other practical bits.
Thanks, Rosie. Today is not going to be just about us speaking. There are opportunities for you to interact and questions for you to reflect on. And you may want to have a pen and paper handy as well. There'll be some quiz questions via Zoom poll, which will pop up, which you've already experienced. And throughout the session, feel free to comment or ask questions in the chat box too as we go along. And there'll be time at the end for questions as well. But do also get in touch afterwards if there's anything we haven't managed to answer, because we will do our best to finish on time. At this point, it's important to note that the Money Makes Change programme aims to help Christians explore ethical issues surrounding their finances. It does not, however, offer specific financial advice or recommend specific products. That sort of advice can only be given by a qualified and independent financial advisor. And so I'll just leave our disclaimer with words to this effect up on the screen for a minute or so for everyone to have a read through, and then we'll move on. As we start this time together, let's pause for a moment and do join in at home with the words of the prayer if you'd like to. God of love, help us to listen to what you require of us, to understand your challenge to do justice, to be moved by your call to love kindness, to see more clearly the way to walk humbly with you. Help us, through prayer, conversation, and action, be better stewards of the resources entrusted to us to shape a fairer world for all. Amen. So, what is Money Makes Change, and who are ECCR? Some of you may know about the work of ECCR, but for those of you who don't, a very brief introduction. ECCR stands for the Ecumenical Council for Corporate Responsibility. We were established about 30 years ago and have brought churches, faith groups, and religious orders together on campaigns and advocacy around how businesses behave in the world. Our vision is to see money used in a way that creates a fairer and more sustainable world. We launched Money Makes Change in January 2020, bringing together our work with individual Christians and churches into one program. I'm just going to pause here and show you a short introductory video to the program.
How does your faith guide your decisions about money? Is your money or your church's money helping create a fairer world? Money Makes Change is a program to help Christians explore and make ethical choices around money. We help people understand how the everyday decisions we make about money impact society and God's creation. We get you thinking and talking about spending, saving and investing, and inspire action to create a fairer world. Imagine the difference we could make if every Christian used a more ethical bank, invested their pension and savings in companies working to better our planet, and supported businesses that live out our values. Join us as together we seek justice, love kindness and walk humbly in every area of our lives, including how we use money. Money Makes Change, connecting faith and finance for a fairer world.
Through the Money Makes Change program, we want to open up conversations, making it easy for Christians to explore the connections between their faith and their finances. Our resources are designed to help you as individuals and also as a church to explore how the choices we make around money can change the world for the better. Jesus certainly didn't shy away from talking about money, and there are more than 2,300 verses on money, wealth, and possessions in the Bible, with Jesus speaking about money in roughly 15% of his preaching and in 11 out of 39 parables. In fact, it was his most talked about topic. So when we think about money in the context of our Christian walk, what the church does speak about, with varying degrees of success, is usually about generosity and giving money away. There are many biblical references to the importance of offering a share of our resources back to God, recognizing that he is the provider of all we have, and giving back is an expression of thanks and dedication. And while of course this is very important, and we wouldn't want to diminish the importance of generosity and the giving away of our first fruits back to God, have we ever thought about how we use the money or resources we don't give away, however generous we might be? What about the money we spend and the money we save for the future? How can we steward the entirety of all our resources faithfully, recognizing that this money also has the power to change the world and build God's kingdom? This is our vision at ECCR. Imagine a world where every Christian chose a more ethical bank, invested their pension and savings in companies working to better our planet, and supported businesses that live out our values. It could transform the financial system and the world we live in. And we aim to do this in 3 ways: through education, action, and community. So education. Our aim is to simplify the language around money and how we can make a positive difference through the everyday choices we make around spending, saving, and investing. We want to help Christians join the dots between their faith and living out their values with their finances. Action. Importantly, once people, whether as individuals or as churches, feel equipped with the knowledge to make a change and inspired to do so, we want to provide lots of examples and ways to take tangible action. And then thirdly, it's around community. For us, it's not just about sharing information and hoping that people take action. We're passionate about nurturing and equipping a community of believers who are passionate about living out their faith, connecting with their finances in this way. We want to be in dialogue with this community, encouraging debate and conversation, learning and encouraging each other. So all of the resources making up the Money Makes Change program include these 3 elements. They include educational material, ways to take action, and share inspiring stories of others who've been on similar journeys. We've recently created a Facebook group where we hope to grow this community, and we'll circulate a link to this following the session. Since launching the program in January, we've launched 4 resources, and I'll touch on all of these towards the end of the session. But for most of the rest of our time together, we'll focus on giving you a taster of our interactive workshop, designed to be used by small groups or connect groups, home groups, hubs, or whatever you may call them in your church or meeting. You could even use it in a cafe church context. The workshop is a really flexible resource that you can use to get a conversation started. It comes with leaders' notes, presentations, slides, handouts, and worksheets. And as with all of our resources, it's free to access and use. There are 5 themed conversations which you can pick and choose from. It starts with looking at our values and attitudes around money and how that's shaped by our backgrounds, by our faith, and by church teaching. Other conversations look at the links between money and global issues, and a deeper look at things like banking, pensions, investments, and consumer choices. The last and arguably most important conversation is around making a change. What do we do with what we've learned, and what action can we take? Rosie's now going to lead us through 2 different conversations from the workshop, which we've adapted slightly for an online conversation. We've picked these to give you a bit of a taster of the workshop. Conversation 3 is around the big picture, and conversation 4A, focusing on banking. So I'll pass over to Rosie, who's going to lead that now.
Brilliant, Janie, thank you. So as Janie said, with this resource, we really want to help people start conversations in their church, their meeting, their community, and get people thinking about why it matters what we do with our money, and why as Christians we need to think through the impact those decisions we make with money can have on the world. So this first conversation is around the big picture, and can help people start to think about why we might want to make more informed choices with the resources that we steward. So we're going to start with a question to reflect on together. I'm just going to bring that up for us. The question is, what is the reality of the world in which we live? So this isn't for you just to think about by yourselves, and if you're happy to perhaps share something in the chat box. I'm asking you to think about 3 local or global issues that are currently of concern to you. So perhaps these are things that you feel are preventing life and all its fullness for people in your local community, or globally, or perhaps about wider God's creation, things like climate change. But do share what's of most concern to you at the moment. Feel free to add that in the chat box and take a look at what other people are sharing. Obviously, if we were meeting face to face, then this would be a kind of different conversation, but we can share a bit with each other here. Climate change and environmental issues will probably be high on many of our lists, but also things like inequality, access to healthcare, access to essential services, conflict, violence, racism, food poverty, perhaps in our local communities, particularly at the moment. And as you'll be well aware, many of these issues have been exacerbated by the pandemic, and there are some really complex links going on between these different concerns. So what does money have to do with all of that? In some cases it might be quite obvious, it might seem to be a very direct link, but we can start with looking at our own money and resources, those things that we have some control over. So just want to talk a little bit about the big picture and how some of these things connect. So lots of people in the UK have savings accounts and pension plans, and most of this money ends up being invested in big publicly listed companies, either in the form of shares or loans. And if we don't have savings or investments or a pension, then we probably still have a bank account, and we may still be able to make some choices about how we spend money, where we buy products or services from, and how we engage with businesses as consumers. So that money that we steward, however small or large it may be, whether we know it or not, it is shaping the world around us through investment in companies and through the spending decisions that we make. And to put it quite simply, if we think of it as a spectrum, at one end we've got some of those companies that are causing harm, employing people in unfair or unsafe working conditions, polluting water sources, manufacturing weapons for the arms trade, increasing carbon emissions, and you'll be able to think of many other examples, I'm sure. And at the other end of the spectrum, we have businesses that are positively affecting our society. Perhaps you can think of some in your own communities. There's businesses that are using the world's resources in a sustainable way and that are providing jobs with fair pay and conditions. So it does matter where our money is being used and invested and spent, what it enables and what it sustains. And we want more people to start to join up those dots. And so for our next thing, we've got something a bit more interactive for you to do. So we've got a few quiz questions to help us start thinking about the connections between our finances and what's going on in the world around us. So these are going to come up as Zoom polls. And just click on the answer you think's correct. Don't worry at all if you get it wrong, because we won't know who's voted for which answer. And some of these questions we've adapted from the Money Makes Change workshop resource. That's where you'll find them. So our first question is around money and climate change. So my question is, how much money have UK banks invested in fossil fuel related projects since 2016, so the last 3 years? So this includes things like expanding existing oil and gas sites, new spending on fracking projects, all of which are increasing carbon emissions, preventing us responding to the climate emergency. So how much money do you think UK banks have invested since 2016? The answer is D, 150 billion, which is really quite shocking. So a report by BankTrack, an organisation that does research into what banks are up to, they worked out this figure, and it includes, I think, 13 billion on new fracking projects, and this is all since 2016, so it's all since the Paris agreements. Our next question is around the church and money. Some of you might know the Church Investors Group. This represents institutional investors from many mainstream church denominations, so that's the central church structures, and also church-related charities in the UK and Ireland. So I want you to have a think, how much money do you think is invested by the Church Investors Group members? So there's 70 members. And the figures are up on your screen now. And the answer is over £21 billion. So collectively, the church and that wider church-based charity sector is a big investor, has a lot of power to wield, and it has a huge influence. So it's a tool that can and is being used for positive change. So the Church Investors Group, if you don't know about it, it was set up to encourage those church institutions to form investment policies based on Christian ethical principles, and to encourage engagement with companies through shareholder action, and to just raise awareness of ethical investment with the wider church. And I think the interesting thing is that if you added up the resources of individual Christians, so without even looking at the institutional money, then it would probably dwarf this amount. So we could say a lot more about that, but I'll just leave that there as something to think about. What do we do with the resources that we steward, whether that is in our institutions or individually? Next question is all about pensions. Nest is a national pension scheme some of you might have heard of. It has over 8 million members, which makes it the biggest scheme in the country by membership. It has £7.4 billion of assets. Nest offers an ethical fund option, and the question is, how many Nest members are enrolled in this ethical fund rather than the default fund? So the default fund is the one that your money automatically goes into, unless you opt to move it somewhere else. How many people do you think have opted into that ethical fund? Yes, I think most of you have spotted the correct answer, which is only 1%. So Nest is taking steps to raise the ethical standards of its default fund, because it's really aware that it actually takes people, it's quite difficult for people to actually make that leap into moving their money. But but obviously much more awareness raising is needed. And I wonder whether you've ever had conversations about ethical pensions in your church or with friends and family. That could just be a really good place to start, is just to start raising awareness of them and helping people make more of those connections between the money that's in their pension, which is actually shaping the world now, as well as having securing a future for people who are saving. So yeah, really important to think about pensions, and we explore that a bit more in the workshop. Final quiz question is around ethical spending, and it's all about fair trade. So this is a good news story to finish with. So back in 1999, the retail fair trade market in the UK was worth £21.8 million. So that's money that people were spending on products with a fair trade mark. In 2019, 20 years later, what was the fair trade retail market estimated to be worth? So it's grown massively. The answer is D, £1.6 billion, including 290 million on fair trade bananas alone. So a huge increase, and churches have played a huge part in that. You probably be involved yourself, whether that's through holding fair trade stalls at the back of church, serving fair trade tea and coffee, or lobbying supermarkets to stock more fair trade products, taking part in campaign actions. So yes, some good news to share there, and proof of what we can do when we start to think more about where we spend our money and how we encourage others to start thinking about that too. So to come back, so thank you for taking part in the quiz. There are more quiz questions in the workshop, but we're just going to leave that there for now. So to come back to some of the things that we said earlier were of concern to us. Some of the figures that we've looked at just now are quite mind-boggling in size. But it's clear to me that our money and the money of ordinary people, whether that's in our bank accounts, in pensions, in savings accounts, it's often fueling and propping up the very things that we're trying to tackle in our churches and communities. So we do need to start thinking in quite a radically different way about how we use and share our money and resources in a way that creates a fairer, more sustainable world. So there's lots more that we could explore within the big picture conversation in the workshop, but we're going to move on now to a taster of the conversation around ethical banking. And as Janie said, this is just one of the themed conversations. So there's also stuff on pensions and investments and consumer choices. And through any of these conversations, you could start to explore with a group ways of thinking through our financial decisions, ways to hold companies' accounts for the impact that they have on the world, and also explore ways of different actions that we can take to help shape a better future. But yeah, we're going to have a look at banking today. And as most people have a bank account, it's hopefully an accessible conversation to have, even in contexts where people don't have very much disposable income for things like savings and investments, which may well be the case in your own church and community. So yeah, you can really use the workshop and tailor it to who you're using the resource with. Lots of people still have the bank account that they had as a child, but some people will have switched. Perhaps you've switched banks once or twice or more. But what do we know about the values and practices of the bank that we have chosen? So we've got another question for you here. Let's pop. I think the poll's going to come up in a moment. So what affects your decision making when choosing a bank? And we're going to bring up just a list of a few different things that might form part of your decision making, and please just choose 3 of these. I think Zoom will allow you to choose more, but if you could restrict yourself to choosing 3. And if there are other reasons, then please feel free to add them in the chat. So we obviously haven't captured everything here. But yeah, I'll just give you a moment to think through that. What affects your decision making when choosing a bank? Oh, and I wonder how your thoughts around this have changed over the years, and what's influenced your thinking around this. And yeah, there may well be other things that you would look for in a bank that are not represented here, and that's something that we could explore if we had a bit more time. But I'll move on. I've got another question for you. So this is a test of your knowledge. So you'll see up on the slide a number of banking and building society logos. I wonder how many of these you can name. So I'm not going to put anyone on the spot, but if you think you can name all of them, feel free to pop that in the chat box, or if you're not sure, don't worry at all. But I just wanted to kind of think a little bit about the number of different banks and building societies that there are to choose from. So I'll pop the answers up now. There we go. I wonder how many of those you recognised. So there's a lot of choice out there. So this is only a small sample, but about 80% of bank accounts held in the UK are with the big five. So those five along the top: HSBC, Lloyds, RBS, Barclays, and Santander. That's 80% of bank accounts. We can rank banks according to their size or how well known they are, how whether people can recognise their branding. But how else could we rank them? Many of you might know of Ethical Consumer, which is an organisation that researches and publishes the social and environmental records of companies. And the big five banks consistently come at the bottom of Ethical Consumer's ethical scorecards. So who comes at the top? So this is from Ethical Consumer's report back at the end of 2019. So obviously this can change, but the top three at that point were Triodos, Cumberland Building Society, and Nationwide Building Society. What are they scored on? What are the kind of issues that we might be concerned about? Main thing to look at is what the bank is investing in, and how transparent it is around that. What does its ethical investment policy look like, and what's it actually doing with our money? So when Ethical Consumer does its ratings, it looks at things like investment in fossil fuels, in sectors associated with pollution and rainforest destruction, investment in the arms trade, in nuclear weapons, and much more. And then they also look more generally at the bank's practices around things like workers' rights, political and lobbying activities, and whether it pays its taxes. So it can be quite challenging to have these conversations and to face up to the fact that you might be with one of the big banks and your money could be financing things that you strongly disagree with, things that you feel are contrary to your faith. So I think there's a really strong argument for having these conversations and also getting people to think more about banking ethically, to ensure that our money isn't causing harm, and so that we can start to play a part in that transition towards a better world. And if you are unhappy with your current bank, then there's a couple of things you can do. You can engage with them. You can do that in lots of different ways. And if you're not happy with their response or the progress that they're making, then you can obviously switch. So I'm not going to go into more detail here. We would do in the workshop, and we can send some helpful links around to you afterwards about what engagements might look like, or useful tools for switching your money. But we will leave that there for now. I think one thing to say is that if you do move your money, then it's really important to tell your bank why you are moving. One of the reasons to have these conversations is not just about individual bank accounts, but it's also about church bank accounts. And obviously churches have different needs from individuals. They might need a charity or a business account, and that might change the options available. So the Ethical Consumer top three that I showed just now, that's for individuals' current accounts. But we've developed a useful resource for church bank accounts, which lists some of the more ethical options that might be suitable. So I'm going to finish the workshop taster here and hand back to Janie, who can tell us a bit more about that resource and other resources that form part of the programme.
Right, thank you, Rosie. I'm going to share my screen now, and I'm going to take you to our website, and hopefully you can all see that. And I'm going to show you where you can find these resources that we've developed. So we've been really excited in developing these resources for individuals and churches, and I'm just going to show you where they are. So this is our homepage, eccr.org.uk. And if you navigate to the homepage, you'll see that there is resources along the top, and you can scroll down here to Money Makes Change. So if I click there and I scroll down a little bit, here you can see the video which we showed you earlier, and we've got program resources. If you scroll down a little bit further, you can see our 4 resources, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail. Scrolling down a little bit further, why Money Makes Change, you can read a little bit about why we called it Money Makes Change, and why our logo looks like it does, if you're interested. So the first of our resources, which we've just taken you through, is our Money Makes Change workshop, which has got its own page. And here's where you'll find all the information that you need. Where do I start? What do I need? We've got a video, which is top tips for how to facilitate the workshop. And we've got somewhere where you can download the leaders notes, the PowerPoint, the worksheets, some going deeper resources if you want to explore anything in a bit more detail, and a helpful video as well that you can use. Just worth pointing out that the leaders notes on here, it's just the first 10 pages of the PDF. We've done that on purpose. It's really just so that we know who's using the resource. If you want the full resource, you just need to drop us an email and say, can I have the full PDF? And we say, of course, here you go. And it's really just for us to kind of keep track of who's using it, and really just to help you as well on your journey as you use the resource, and for you to give us a bit of feedback as you do that. But it's completely free for you to use, and we can help you as you do that. So that's the workshop. That's our primary resource that we've developed at the moment, and that's the one that we've had a taster of this evening. We launched that in January. Since then, we've also launched a few other resources, and I'll just talk you through those briefly now in case they're also of interest to you and your church or meeting. The next one that we launched was Messy Money. And some of you may have heard of Messy Church. Messy Church is an initiative of the Bible Reading Fellowship, and it's primarily aimed at children and families. And we collaborated with them to develop something called Messy Money, and it's using the story of Zacchaeus, and it's really talking to children and young people about the concept of good versus bad money. And actually, although churches aren't meeting in person now, and Messy churches aren't meeting in person, there's actually loads of really cool activities that you can still do at home right now. If you've got kids or you've got grandkids, it's worth checking out. You can download it here by pressing download Messy Money. So take a look on our website. Money Makes Change, if I go back there and I go here to Money Makes Change Guided Prayer, that's another resource that we launched in April. This is a slightly more kind of contemplative, reflective meditation, which is based and inspired on the 5-step daily examine from the Ignatian tradition. It's a video which you can pause, and it's got some reflective music, it's got some notes that accompany it, and it just takes you through a series of kind of prayerful contemplations, thinking through decisions you've made around money and finances in your life, just to try and help you kind of join the dots between your faith and your finance. And then the final resource that Rosie has mentioned, which if I take you back to our Money Makes Change homepage, and I scroll down a little bit here, you'll see we've called it our action starter. The idea is that we're going to develop a number of action starters, helping Christians take practical action. But the first one we've done is around charity bank accounts. And this is where churches can take practical action by choosing to bank with a more ethical bank. We've looked at 5 of the more ethical options out there. You can click here to download the analysis that we've done. And so we've looked at 5 different banks that are out there, and we've looked at things like fees. We've looked at whether they have branches, physical branches, all sorts of things. And we've looked at their ethical credentials as well. So really just to give kind of churches a helpful guide when they're considering whether or not they should be switching their banks. We've done that. Other ways that you might like to kind of get involved, and things you'd like to find out more. If you'd like to find out more about what we're up to, the best things to do is to follow us on social media. On the top of our website here, you've got links to Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, So we're kind of covering all the main social media places. We're not on TikTok yet, but we're on everything else just about. If you want to sign up to our newsletter, an easy place to do that is at the bottom of our website here in our footer. You can just quickly fill in your details, your name, your email, press send, and you can subscribe. We don't spam you, I promise. We send an email sort of once a month with just news, and we keep you updated with what's coming up. Just to let you know what is coming up in terms of new resources that we have in the pipeline. After the summer, we've got a very exciting new tool which is aimed at churches and meetings. It's called the Money Makes Change Pledge. And it's a tool that's going to help churches take practical action around these things. And it's got 4 different areas which will churches will fill in questions, and churches will pledge to take action on 4 different areas, and it will be a tool that they can come back to year after year. We've also got some Bible studies that we're working on as well as a host of other tools. Other ways to get involved. You can contact us if you're interested in volunteering. We've got a host of different things we're looking for volunteers for. And if you'd like to donate, you can click on Get Involved and donate. We are a charity. We're completely reliant on donations. All of our resources are free. That is very much our ethos. We will never charge for these resources. We want to make these conversations as accessible as possible. We really believe in this message, and we don't want to create any kind of barriers to getting our message across. So if you have been inspired and you do want to support us, you can find out more information on our website as to how to do that, or please feel free to drop me an email if you want to find out more information as well. Either through the email address, which I think you should have after the email I sent round ahead of today, or just at info@uccr.org.uk. In terms of events that we have coming up, you can find out more. We've got a Get Involved events page here on our website. These were the 2 events we had today, but we've got some really exciting online workshops coming up. So this is where we're going to be using our workshop resource, and we're going to be running an online version of it. So on the 1st, 8th and 15th of July, I think one or 2 of you on this call may have already signed up for this, which is fantastic. And this is really where we're going to be having much more of an in-depth conversation. We'll be off mute. We'll be having Zoom breakout groups. We'll be having much more of a sort of a conversation you might be used to in a sort of a home group, connect group type conversation, that we haven't been able to dive into the detail and debate and the conversation that tonight hasn't been about. But that's what's going to be the next 3 weeks. There's a morning group, there's an evening group. They're going to be 90 minutes. So if you are interested, you can click here and sign up over on Eventbrite. So we're nearing the end of our hour now. I'm going to stop my share. Rosie's going to share her screen again.
Coming back. Here we go.
Here we go.
There's just a reminder.
So we hope this has given you a bit of an insight into the Money Makes Change program and how the program could support you individually or in your church, and how to have these conversations around faith and finance and to take action for a fairer world.
Thank you, Janie. Before we go to questions, I just wanted to say something. I want to acknowledge that we're really aware that this is a very challenging time for everyone as churches are working out how to be church in the midst of pandemic and lockdown and all that brings. So as we touched on earlier, the pandemic has deepened the inequalities in our society, and there's so much that needs to be responded to locally and globally. But there are lots of movements for change coming together at the moment, lots of signs of hope and a growing appetite for shaping a better society. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of recent reports that might be of interest if you're thinking through your church's report, your church's response. So the first is from Tearfund. Tearfund have recently published a paper called The World Rebooted, and that's calling on churches to help build back better after the crisis. And Theos, which is a Christian think tank, have produced a detailed report on economic inequality and the churches, which really looks at tackling the root causes of inequality, and it touches on things like investment, impact investment, both institutional level and individual level. So I think these could be really useful reports if you're starting to have these kind of conversations in your churches, and would work really well to, alongside Money Makes Change resources, to inform and deepen engagement. So I know this, this clearly is a challenging time for many of you, and it will continue to be so for the months to come, I expect. But I also think that there are more opportunities to have these kind of conversations. I think more people are wondering about what a better world might look like, and what role they could have in shaping that. So we do hope that you'll join us and others who are working for that kind of change, and let us know how we can support you in what you're doing. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been great to see you all here and to have you participating. Seemed like all the technology worked quite well, so that was a relief. Do stay in touch, and I know some people may have to dash off, and that's absolutely fine. I'm just going to leave one final slide up. Just in case you'd like to pause for a moment and reflect on some of the things that we've talked about, there's a prayer up on the screen. So we won't close the meeting for a few minutes, we'll leave it open. Do feel free to leave when you need to. Ask any other questions you have in the chat box, and Janie or I will respond. But goodbye for now, goodbye from me, goodbye from Janie. Thanks so much for joining, and yeah, hope to stay in touch with you all.
Thank you all very much for coming. It was really great to meet you virtually, see some of you on the cameras, and please do stay in touch. Thanks all.